This is Anthony Gangi, host of Tier Talk, and today my guest is going to be Dr. John Paitakes, who wrote 50 Years Working in the Criminal Justice System. And today we're at his book signing, which is at the Book House in Millburn on Essex Street, 281 Essex Street. So today when we get back, I'm going to go sit down with my guest who's right behind me. And yes, he's been on my show before, so he is a familiar face. And we're going to discuss his book, 50 Years Working in the Criminal Justice System. Where were you 50 years ago? I stand by for our sponsors.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Being a corrections officer takes its toll on even the strongest individuals. The constant need to perform at the highest level, putting your life at risk in a hostile environment, and the mental scarring of traumatic experiences. 31% of corrections officers show symptoms of PTSD, and 66% of people with PTSD also suffer with a substance abuse problem. The Transformations First Responders program is specially designed to help veterans and officers heal from the grips of addiction and PTSD in a comfortable, supportive, and serene setting. You are not alone. If you have questions about the services we offer, give us a call at 866-762-8454 to get more information on this affordable and life-changing program.
Hi, thank you guys for listening to our sponsors. Now, my guest today is Dr. John Paitakes, a 50-year criminal justice professional, and that's the reason why he wrote this book, 50 Years Working in the Criminal Justice System. I gotta tell you something, Dr. John Paitakes, that is a lot of years to be devoted to one field. And we've actually had John Paitakes on the show before, correct? We talked about parole and probation. I just gotta ask you, the book, why do you feel right now there's a need for such a book?
Well, Anthony, I think the two biggest things facing this country right now are economy and crime. Terrorism comes under crime or whatever. And I think, we're finding an influx of more students majoring in criminal justice who want to get into the field or whatever. So, based on my practical experience for 50 years in the field, I wanted to share some of those tips for, students and others who are interested in getting into that field. So part of it is biographical, where I talk about how I got into the system and the different positions, but it's not so much to pat myself on the back, but it's to for the reader to see, well, these are some of the things, if you follow, perhaps you can have successful careers also in criminal justice. So there is some detail in there regarding that. And then for those who are students and want to excel in the field, I give them the best tips I can. I taught at a university for 20 years and adjuncted at a number of colleges and universities, so I've probably talked to thousands of students. I was the internship coordinator at Seton Hall University, so I helped place students in internships and even jobs. So I'm sharing that information and those tips with others who are interested.
So you started the field in 1967, correct?
Right.
So from 1967 to today, so actually we're talking about 51 years.
Actually, right.
Correct? Actually, it's 51 years, but still doesn't matter. 50 years, 51 years. It's still extremely, extremely impressive. I don't know many people that have reached such a milestone. Actually, I think you're the only person I know that reached such a milestone in the criminal justice profession. But what would you say has changed the most from when you entered the field back in 1967 to right now, 2018?
Well, what I'm encouraged about is the caliber of people coming into the field now. Back in the 60s or whatever, if you graduated high school and you could probably get a job in many fields in criminal justice without even a college degree. Fast forward today, and it's become much more professionalized, many of the fields. Okay, so college degree has almost become like the high school diploma was. Years ago, the college degree was a great thing to have in the 60s, and I remember my family was very proud. I was the only one in the family that got a college degree. Well, now we go forward 50 years. There's so many other ways that students can get, a college degree that, and many more are going. So we're getting a much better educated and a better trained person coming into the field. So it's now a profession, as compared to it was just a job many years in the past. So I think that's an encouraging thing. The training has gotten much better. The academies have increased the training. Even though a lot of positions require a college degree, you're getting people with a master's degree coming in. So again, the caliber of people coming in, I think has really helped, the whole criminal justice field.
What about the criminal justice system itself in the course of 50 years? A lot of changes have happened in the course of 50 years. I mean, you have the harsher sentences,
Right.
and now we're trying to start seeing change in that, where we're trying to get inmates out, try to focus on more community programming. How's that affected you during your course of 50 years?
Well, you're right, Anthony. Back in the 60s and 70s, the thing was build bigger prisons, warehouse prisoners, punishment was kind of the main emphasis, etc. But what we learned from that was the longer that somebody was in, they can become more criminalized. And the recidivism rate was over 60% or whatever. New Jersey has really made some good forward progress in that area. We went from about 10 years ago, 32,000 inmates in the state prison to it's under 20,000 right now, right? They've closed down one state prison. They're talking about closing a second. We put more emphasis on rehabilitation programs, halfway houses, other alternatives or whatever, Let's educate those who are in prison. Let's teach them some type of vocation so they don't come back to the same system. So that's been a very encouraging thing that I've seen. And as you know, I've been on the parole board. I'm on my second term on the parole board. So I've interviewed over 6,000 inmates in prison. And I'm noticing that we are seeing an increase in those who are taking programs and trying to further their education and their skills.
We're talking about therapeutic programs, or we're talking about transitional programs. What type of programs are we getting on the table?
Well, there's a variety of counseling programs. I mean, what was the problem that got the person in there? And we know that drug-related type of problems is one of the major reasons that a lot of the prison population had increased over a period of time, and more harsher sentences. So we got the therapeutic programs, drug programs. They just converted a state prison into a therapeutic community mid-state correctional facility now. Is for addicted people. They're inmates, but who have that problem and they want the help. They'll go into that program, and we've had some pretty good successes there. So the therapeutic programs, they can get their GED while they're in there. Every prison obviously has a library and a law library, and so they can sort of self-educate themselves if they want. But there's even college courses offered for certain inmates in certain institutions, okay? And I know a couple inmates that went out, got their college degree even after prison. They got some credits in there. And actually one is now a counselor in a state prison. So there is much more opportunity for the inmate if he or she is motivated.
Well, you said the key right there. A lot of the times, it's a matter of trying to get the person motivated to take those programs, but you want that motivation to be internal, which means that I want the person to want to take the programs because they feel they need it,
right.
Not because they want to take it to it looks better for parole or it looks better.
Right.
How do we figure out which inmates are taking the programs for the right reasons and which inmates are taking the programs just for that external incentive?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Anthony. And there really is no easy way to predict that. It's not a perfect science, as you know, just like sociology, psychology, criminal justice. But what we do is on the program, we try and give our best educated prediction. All right? We have a host of information, psychological, sociologicals, academic reports, etc., from the institution and certainly the correctional staff. We interview them for a period of time, perhaps maybe up to a half hour. And we have reports from their counselors or whatever, and so we try and evaluate who is really sincere about this or who's just trying to build up some programs to put it on their resume, and then we make a prediction. The overall emphasis has to be, is the person now a risk, in spite of everything else? If they're a risk, then most likely they're not going to get parole that time if we see a danger or aggressive risk. But if they've done some programs and they have the documentation and it appears to have a positive attitude, we'll probably give them the opportunity to at least do a halfway back program, a halfway house or whatever, which is just an extension of prison, but they'll have an opportunity to work in the community and have counseling. So we're utilizing a lot more of that. And the perseverance has to be in the person themselves, and that's true of any addiction. If you really want to stop smoking, drinking, alcohol, drugs, you have to really want to, and so, that's what the counselors try to do.
Right, and I believe that we do have people that work behind the wall that do go above and beyond to make sure the programs are there and it's the best programs available for those inmates. But again, we still have to make sure that the inmate has the right incentive when they decide to take the program. And I'm sure that you guys look at that too, because you guys, when you do parole and you're reviewing the files, you're looking for institutional adjustment outside the original crime. So obviously they have the crime, but how have they adjusted during their time of incarceration, correct?
Right. I mean, you know, the other thing we look at is that here you are in a controlled setting. All right. Now, if you can't follow the rules in a controlled setting and you're having infractions and assaults, etc., then the thinking is, well, how are you going to do out in society where you don't have the control? You know, so you're right. I mean, their behavior in the institution is also a key factor. You know.
Right. And then when we're looking at inmates who decide, let's say, to go for status or release, and they, let's say for some reason they don't meet that criteria, there still has to be some form of corrective action so they are able to meet that criteria. So as I said, programming is good, because now if I have an inmate that I feel that, okay, this inmate has done well throughout his time, but still they're in for an aggravated offense, I still feel that they haven't really understood how it is to see it from the victim's perspective. Well, before we have you come up again, we would like you to take these programs. So can programs be target specific to the individual going out for parole?
Oh yeah, definitely. The forms I've noticed, I was on the parole board once before in the late 90s, and then just came back on about 2 years, and I've noticed that the forms are much more comprehensive now. So it's not about just denying the person parole. We have to fill out a form, all the reasons for that, and then make recommendations at the end. So, you know, we'll recommend focus on the victim or anger management or behavior modification or whatever. So therefore, but the next time they come up for parole, we're going to look at that previous thing and say, wait, did they follow through on that? You know, now if they didn't, that's not a positive sign. You know, so yeah, we do make the recommendations, whatever. Now, obviously, when they get back to the institution, a certain amount may depend on, is there a waiting list for that program, etc. But you know, those recommendations are made, and you know, those who follow through, by the next time they come up, there's a very good chance they'll get parole.
Now, I like what you said. There's a very good chance. It doesn't mean it's guaranteed yet, but it's just something that can help look favorable when they go up for parole. So that actually I believe should get out there. A lot of people think, well, I've taken these programs, now that guarantees me the chance. No, it's just a chance for you to be reviewed again in a little bit more of a favorable light. But definitely that institutional adjustment is something that you guys look at in a manner to decide, okay, is this person ready for release? So that must be hard, because now you have to, when you're reviewing someone, let's say for parole, you have their original crime, right? And their original crime, let's say it's something horrific like a manslaughter case or a murder case, but then throughout their time when he's up for his first parole, let's say he's done about 20 years, right? Never caught a charge, has taken every program, seems to be the model inmate. Right. Now when you see him up for parole, how much does his past crime could affect your decision, even though he's been a model inmate in regards to programming and catching no charges?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, and that comes up periodically. But the thing you have to remember is we're not the judges. In other words, the judge sentenced that person to whatever the term was. And if the term indicated that he or she would be eligible for parole, then again, we're not there to resentence. So we're supposed to look at it objectively, like honing in on what you just said. How has he or she adjusted while they were in the institution? What programs did they take? What is their parole plan if they got out? Do they have any kind of skills that are marketable? Do they have a possible job waiting for them, or they've made some contact? You know, and so what we're trying to figure is that in spite of the crime, and look, nobody likes to see any horrendous crime, a rape, an aggravated assault, a murder charge, and we do feel for the victim, and the victim has input, but again, the overall evaluation is the person now a risk after 20, 25 years, you know, in the institution, you know, and if they do appear to be a risk, then, you know, they may probably get denied. But if they followed all the other rules and regulations and everything looks fairly positive, they're probably going to get parole. And that's where I think the public gets upset when they say, oh, this cop killer or this rapist got out of prison. How could the parole board have done that? Well, Anthony, I can't think of anybody I ever sat with on the board that said, oh, I think he's going to do a crime, let's release him. I mean, we got to be pretty confident. We both have to agree on a murder charge. It's the majority of the board, so there may be 8 people evaluating that case. So they're really giving it a lot of scrutiny, of course keeping in mind that it's not a perfect science either, you know. So that's really how it's supposed to be.
Well, that was the big discussion out of New York just recently, where you had the the union, the police officer union, fighting to not get the one gentleman released from parole, but parole was granted to, he was a cop killer.
Right.
And I, in my opinion, I was thinking that even though, in my opinion, my biased perspective, I would not want to have seen that person released, but
Right.
I know that you have to be objective, and I understand that perspective because being on the administrative level, I know that you have to be objective and you have to make your decisions based on what you yourself can justify, because ultimately that person up for parole, if they don't get paroled, they can appeal.
Oh, of course.
Now, what happens during that appeal? Where does that go, and how does that affect you?
Well, there's an administrative group of people. They're not judges, but they're administrative hearing officers that will review all that. There's an attorney that reviews it, the form. That whole proceeding had been recorded, so they'll re-listen to all that. So if it looks like it was prejudicial, or you didn't take something into account, or you didn't give them some credit for some positive kind of thing, it can get reversed. It's very rare, okay? Now, your second question was, what effect does that have on the parole board member? Well, I mean, they may be questioned about it and why that decision was made, etc. Again, keeping in mind that it's not a perfect thing. We would hope that people, and it's a hard thing, and in corrections and law enforcement, can you keep your emotions separate from
Right, that's
same thing. I mean, the cop killer, geez, if I was the judge or whatever, maybe I would have said life imprisonment with no parole.
Right.
But I'm not. So if they said life imprisonment, that means they're coming up for parole at some point. So that's the difficult thing. But that's what the role of the parole board is.
Well, that's why I feel jobs like this, especially jobs in the criminal justice system, is not meant for anyone, because there are conflicts. There are decisions that, biasly, I would love to do this. I would love to. As you said, someone that had a horrendous rape. You know what I mean? In my opinion, I may not want to see him get released, but I'm not put in the position for my bias. I'm put in my position where I have to be objective and I have to review what's in front of me. Because again, always my decisions can always be challenged, and if I'm making decisions that are seen as biased and not objective, I can get removed from my position. Which ultimately, I think, what would be the case if you started making decisions that were more biased. What could be the outcome?
Well, ultimately, if there is a track record of that or whatever, they could be dismissed. That's very rare. And everybody on the board, from my experience, has been a professional. They know what's expected of them or whatever. They're held to a higher standard, just like anybody in criminal justice. So I haven't really encountered that. Now, I can't speak, for the whole country, but that just goes with the territory.
Right, and as I said, it's not easy territory to navigate. It's just not. I think anything in the criminal justice profession, again, working in corrections, these officers right now are going through understaffed facilities, riots, and everything, and they still have to come to work every day and be professional when there's that tension underneath. And that's another aspect that the public don't realize, that you have that conflict, but these professionals work through it, they maintain the professionalism, and they still get the job done. And again, I love to give a lot of credit to my brothers and sisters in the criminal justice system, because it's conflicts like this that the public is not aware about. But again, we remain professional, get the job done. Now, your book, I had a chance to read it, I think about 2 months back. You gave it to me pretty quick, right after it was released. I had a copy already in the mail. And I got to thumb through it, and I like how your book is broken down. It's relatively, each chapter is relatively short. It's a very quick read for each chapter, which is great, because I can pick it up if I have 5 minutes. I can go through each chapter real quick and get a real good sense of the story that you're trying to tell. Like, how did you break your book down chapter to chapter?
Well, what they say, it was my first attempt to actually write a book, was to make an outline of what you really wanted to cover, all right? This was my sort of calling or legacy, let's put it that way. So I really wanted to say about, how my career started and the steps I took, etc., and then share in a very practical, realistic, easy read way. All right. My research there's two types of research: academic and qualitative. Mine was qualitative, where it's really based on somebody who's worked in the field face to face, observed things, seen jails, prisons, worked with police officers, etc. So that was my goal, to try and make it more realistic, practical, easy read for those who are going to read it. Okay.
Right, and I noticed that you broke the book down by your journey in the career. So your early education, when you entered the field, when you got appointed, right. Then when you went into education yourself, and then you go after that into tips and where we're going now, right, with the profession. So, as we mentioned earlier, you've seen a lot in the course of your 51 years. You're still seeing a lot. Where do you see criminal justice professions going in the next 25 years?
What I can see right now is the professionalism. Again, years ago, if somebody wanted to be a police officer, for example, in the 60s and 70s, you pass your high school, you get your high school diploma, you pass the physical, most likely you get the job. Fast forward today, now primarily in New Jersey, very competitive, okay? And even though a college degree may not be required in some police departments, all of a sudden now you're going to have a lot of college graduates. Every college and university in the state has a criminal justice program. So every May, there's several thousand people graduating with degrees in criminal justice for a limited number of positions, all right? So if I'm the chief and I get all these applications, I'm looking for the most qualified, the best educated, who's got the best background skills, etc. So we're bringing in just a much more professional person. So I'm encouraged by that. I think that trend's going to continue. In addition, the salary levels, the benefits have gone up considerably. The average salary for a police officer in New Jersey is $90,000 a year or more. And so now we're getting people in from political science, sociology, psychology, coming over to criminal justice. And that's what I've seen in my 20 years teaching, also.
And I also, actually, to be honest with you, I'm starting to see, because I got a chance to speak at Rutgers, I spoke at your school at one point. I really am, I know that the college kids are very interested, and from the both classes, I see more experienced teachers coming in who actually have worked the profession that are now teaching. I kind of call that the evolution of education, because now we're seeing people in the field that are really giving the students a balanced perspective of the criminal justice system from both the, I guess you would say, the inmate advocacy side as well as the experienced professionals, which unfortunately people think that we're on opposite sides of each other, but we're not. What we want is just the same as what the inmates want. We want a safe environment. We want the proper staffing. We want to make sure things are done in a professional and safe manner. So it's good that you get these college kids that are coming out after taking a class with an experienced professional that has not just teaching, but has worked the field, to get that real balance of, I know I'm being taught what the book says, but I'm also being taught how to apply it in real life by hearing real stories like what you can tell them in class, which I think goes way past the PowerPoint, and you need that. And I think when you teach, you do that, right? You do go way past the PowerPoint.
Right. I think you're right. And, we get an evaluation at the end of every semester. Students do autonomously an evaluation on the course and the professor or whatever. And I've saved them over the years. And I've noticed that most of the students, they do prefer that type of instruction. We'll take them on field trips to a jail or prison. I'll bring in a police officer, a correction officer, a forensics guy or whatever, so they can really get a hands-on understanding of it. So I think you're right. And that's my philosophy. I think a combination of both, obviously, the academic and the research and the practical, so a good university will have a combination of that type of faculty.
Because there's definitely a balance, correct?
Yeah, it's a balance. And we need the numbers and the statistics, etc. But, sometimes it doesn't cover exactly what happens in the institution or in the police department or in the probation department, and so I'll always share that practical thing. I'll even do role playing with the students, put them in a position of somebody on parole, and then somebody else will play the role of a thing. I'll give them the forms. All right, now you evaluate, and they really get a good feel for, Yeah,
because it's good to take people outside the book and let them see how things can be applied. I know the book says this, but let's test it. Let's see if this really works. And I think that's where we come in, because sometimes I don't even realize that when I'm working, I'm actually doing a theory. I just don't know the name of it, but I've been doing it every day. Right. I was teaching a class with Major Soto. I was helping out, and it was funny because we were going over the specific terminology, and I was like, "Oh, that's what that's called." He goes, "Really?" I said, "I do that every day, but I didn't know the term." Now, real quick, before we come to a close, I noticed that in Chapter 7, you have tips for success for criminal justice applicants. So what are some of the tips for success that you would give someone that's trying to enter the field of criminal justice right now? And would these tips apply to all professions within the criminal justice system?
Yes. All right, well, what they first have to understand is that, look, now there's thousands of people competing for the position. So even though you got the Bachelor's of Science or the Bachelor's of Arts in criminal justice, what else distinguishes you from all those other people? Do you have you taken internships? Okay. Do you have any other certifications in first aid and certified emergency training, some other certifications? Do you speak another language? That's a big thing.
Right.
And not just Spanish, that happens to be one of the prominent ones, but any other language, okay? Do you belong to any associations or whatever? And what I found over the years is the students that really take all that advice to heart have the best chances of getting into the field. So again, you have to distinguish yourself somehow from all the other graduates. Again, the college degree is great, and it's not like it was in the 60s or 70s. That was an automatic key through the door. Well, now we have a lot of keys that have to get through the door, you know, and so what else do you bring to the table? You know, so if I'm the chief or director of the agency, those type of things, you know, the other language, the internships, good communication skills, good technical skills are all important factors in joining organizations, networking, meeting people, go to conferences.
Now, when you say organizations, what type of organizations?
Well, you know, New Jersey Correction Association, right. I belonged to it for years. American Probation and Parole Association. There's Law Enforcement Associations. So there's a variety of different state and national associations. It's a good idea to belong to them. You'll get the paperwork and the newsletters from each one. They'll talk about job openings. They'll have conferences. Go to the conference. Meet some of the people there. Get their calling cards or whatever. You know, and so knowing people in the field too. If you know somebody who's a mentor, a former chief of police or director of a program or whatever, you know. So all those kinds of things can really help the person. So if you really want to get into the field, even though it's much more competitive today, if you follow all those tips, I think you got a real good chance.
John, looking back, if you could do anything different, would you?
You know, a lot of it wasn't planned. A lot of it was accidental, and sometimes timing is a key thing or whatever. When I was going for further degrees, I kind of contemplated between law school psychology and public administration, and they were all actually interrelated or whatever. And I enjoyed what I was doing. You know, one master's in counseling, my doctorate's in public administration because I was in an administrative position. So as I look back, you know, I have no regrets really. Everything worked out well, you know.
So you actually had that right trajectory and just kind of...
Well, you know, my thing was to constantly think about how you can improve. While I was working in probation, you didn't need a master's, but there was a federal grant and I got some compensation for tuition remission or whatever, so I thought, well, this would be a good thing. I got the master's, I was teaching at a community college, and then I realized that this might be a good second career, but really a PhD will give you that much more of an opportunity, so I decided to go for a PhD. And I remember a boss of mine at the time was saying, why are you going for a PhD? You don't need that in probation. And I said, no, it's just a personal kind of thing, and maybe in a second career I might want to do something more, so I think it'll be helpful. You know, so it's that kind of thing. You know, I just kind of always wanted to, you know, be motivated to do more. You know?
I'll tell you something, John. 50 years, 51 years, if you will, I don't think anybody could do anymore. Guys, this is a great read. 50 Years Working in the Criminal Justice System by Dr. John M. Paitakes. It's a book that outlines his career and also gives tips for those who want to enter in this field. And guys, this is 50 years of experience, so he's went through a lot of changes and he found a way to adapt and adjust, which I find is amazing in itself, especially in the course of 50 years. Some of us have trouble with adapting through changes that over the course of 6 months. I can just imagine the changes you guys went through in the course of 50 years. So, Dr. John Paitakes, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Anthony. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate it. Guys, if you haven't, please check out the other show I did with him before. We talked about the process of parole and probation. I even think we touched on O.J. Simpson a little bit, because at that time he was getting ready to be released. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, share. Love to get your thoughts. If you get his book, love to get your thoughts on what you think of the book. You know, read it, pick it up. It's got some great information there, especially for those who are on my page that are college students that follow my YouTube channel, that follow Corrections One. There's a lot of good information here that you can utilize when going out for a job in the criminal justice profession. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. Stay safe. Love you guys.